Welcome to EDH 502, Unit 3, Presentation 2. In this presentation, we will talk about classroom assessment and how to measure behavior. As we know, collecting data on behavior issues is really critical when we are working with students who have been identified as having challenging behaviors. And in this presentation, we will talk about some methods as to how we can collect reliable and valid data on those student behaviors. So, the first question that comes to our mind is, what about behavior should we measure? We must consider behavior difficulties just like we consider academic difficulties. And therefore, we should look at the environment in terms of the school, classroom, and sometimes even home. We should look at the curriculum, the instruction, as well as the learner. So all these aspects are very important, because only then will we get a holistic picture about why the behaviors are occurring and what we need to do in order to reduce or increase a certain behavior. If behaviors still occur or exist after we have considered the environment, curriculum, instruction, and the learner, we must determine the function of the behavior. And to determine the function of the behavior, we basically have to figure out why the behavior is occurring. So, that is, we're talking about antecedents, but we should also think about the consequences that are maintaining the behaviors. In order to get a clear understanding of the function of the behavior, we must conduct a functional behavior assessment. The Functional Behavior Assessment, or FBA, provides us with an operational definition of behavior. It identifies events that are related to the behavior, that are the antecedents or the setting events, and it also helps us identify consequences that maintain the behavior. Based on data that we collect on the behavior, we then form a hypothesis about the function of the behavior, and then this is followed by direct observations which are conducted to confirm the hypothesis. There are number of forms that are available in order to conduct the functional behavioral assessment. Some of your schools that you're working in might all have their own form to conduct a FBA, and I will also share a few with you which you can find posted in the unit that we are studying right now, which would be Unit 3. There are various steps that one has to conduct before a functional behavioral assessment is complete. It is very important that we stay organized, and therefore, in this slide, we will be talking about some of the steps. The first and foremost, the most important step being that we have to identify and define the problem behavior. It is very important that we define the problem behavior in terms of it being observable and measurable. The second step is when we start collecting information to determine the function of the behavior. In order to do so, we could use direct and indirect measures of behavior. And we also want to make sure that we check the accuracy of behavior measurement. We want to make sure that we use valid and reliable assessments. The third step is categorizing the behavior, and based on that category, form a hypothesis. To talk about each step in a few more details, in step 1, we can ask ourselves the following questions. Does the student's behavior significantly differ from that of his or her classmates? If it doesn't, then maybe it is not a problem. It is not something that the student needs to work on. It could be something that the environment needs to be changed. Does the behavior lessen the possibility of successful learning for student and or others? Once again, if the behavior is not impacting student learning or peer learning, then maybe we need to rethink about how we are defining our challenging behavior. Have past efforts to address the behavior using standard interventions been successful? If this is not the case, then probably we need to stop, take a step back, and implement some interventions. Does the behavior represent a skill or performance deficit rather than a cultural difference. If it is not a skill or performance deficit, then once again we have to step back and make sure it is not due to instruction or the background from where the student is coming. Is the behavior serious, persistent, chronic, or a threat to safety of the student or others? And this would be very, very critical again in determining how severe the problem is. If the behavior persists, is some disciplinary action likely to result? And here we are thinking about consequences. So these are some very critical questions that we should think about before we think of conducting a functional behavioral assessment, because that could mean that we could be doing something else instead of investing our time in conducting all the observations that would be required for a functional behavioral assessment. These are some examples of problem behavior. So let's look at the first one. Trish is aggressive. If that's the statement, then it doesn't really give us enough information. So therefore, this really cannot be a problem behavior definition. However, if we say Trish hits other students during recess when she does not get her way. Now, this is really, really explicit. It tells us exactly when Trish gets aggressive and why she gets aggressive. The next example, Carlos is disruptive. Once again, it isn't clear as to whether why Carlos is getting disruptive. You really can't measure or observe the behavior, because being disruptive for one person could mean something different for another person. However, when we say Carlos makes irrelevant and inappropriate comments during class discussion, then it's something that's more concrete. We know when Carlos is becoming disruptive and exactly what is happening when Carlos is exhibiting such behaviors. Jan is hyperactive. Once again, not concrete, doesn't give us enough information. It is not measurable and observable. So we could say something like Jan leaves her assigned area without permission. Jan completes only portions of her independent work. Jan blurts out answers without raising her hand. Let's look at step 2 of the functional behavioral assessment process. We want to figure out times when the behavior does or does not occur. Does it happen just prior to lunch, during a particular subject? When exactly is it occurring or not occurring? It is important for us to think when the behavior is not occurring as well. And maybe that's a clue to figure out why the behavior is not occurring at that particular time. Specific location of the behavior, classroom, playground, is it during recess? We really need to pinpoint as to where the behavior is occurring. It could be in multiple locations, or maybe it's not happening at multiple locations. We must also think about conditions when the behavior does not occur. That is, whether it's occurring in small groups during unstructured time, or during recess when students are playing in a large group, and so forth. Individuals present when the behavior is most or least likely to occur. Um, so, is the behavior occurring around certain students or when the substitute is there, and so forth? So, you really have to think about when the behavior is occurring, where the behavior is occurring, under what conditions the behavior is occurring, and also around who the behavior is occurring. We must also look at the events or conditions that typically occur before the behavior. Therefore, we must really look into the antecedents, that is, the time just before the behavior occurred. Is the behavior occurring when the student is assigned to a reading group? If we should also think about events of conditions that typically occur after the behavior. So now we are thinking about consequences. Is the student sent out of the room every time the behavior occurs? We should also look at common setting events. It could be during bad weather, during testing. So we really have to think about, is there a cause for the behavior? Do we see patterns? We should also look at other behaviors that are associated with the problem behavior. Maybe there have been a series of negative peer interactions when the behaviors have occurred. So basically, in the second step, we are trying to look for patterns as to when behaviors are occurring or not occurring, whichever may be the case. Setting events is something that I would like to spend some time on only because these are the most difficult to figure out. Setting events differ based on types, physical environment, and social or situations. In terms of physiological and biological events, it could be due to fatigue, medication, time of day, or other health conditions. In terms of physical or environmental, it could be because of lighting in the room, seating arrangement, size of the area, noise level. Social and situational could be changes in routine, presence or absence of certain individuals, home related issues that occurred prior to the observational session. So you really never know when a particular event could trigger a behavior. Just to give you an example, this is a personal example. So I was working with the teachers to figure out why a student has typical behaviors in the classroom. This was a fourth grade student, and we just couldn't figure out what was happening. The student would be very agitated on some days, and on the other days, he was just fine. After a lot of data collection, a lot of asking questions, interviews, and so forth, we finally figured out that the days the dad was coming to drop the student, he would have problem behaviors, whereas when the student was coming with the mom, there were no problem behaviors. So we ended up interviewing the parents, and we just still couldn't figure out because everything just seemed right. Finally, we sat down and talked to the student as well, but we couldn't get any information. However, finally, during one interview, we figured out that when the student was coming with the dad, they were taking a different route to come to school, whereas the mom was taking a different one. Now, this particular kid was very fond of fire engines, and when the mom was bringing him to school, she would take the route where they would cross a fire station, whereas the dad was coming a different way where the student was not able to see the fire engines. And it took us months and months and months to figure it out. But when we kind of changed that and the dad would follow the same way to come to school as the mom, the number of problem behaviors, went down. They did not go away completely because there were a lot of other things happening, but they've definitely reduced for especially during the day, I would say, the first few class periods. So like you see, it can be really really tricky to figure out what the antecedents, and especially if they are setting events, but you really have to think about it. So, in terms of measuring behavior, there are direct and indirect measures. Direct measures include actually observing the behavior and describing the behaviors around it. These could be in the terms of collecting ABC, which is antecedent behavior consequence data. They could be in the form of scatter plots. And indirect assessments rely on the use of interviews with teachers and other adults, parents. They could be the bus drivers, cafeteria workers, who have direct contact with the student. Just an example of a completed scatter plot form. So it could be as simple as a tally mark. So if you have your data collection forms ready, it is something very, very simple to do. But once again, you'll notice that the behavior of concern is very explicitly described so that whoever picks up this form would be able to collect data. And then you have place for observation notes if somebody wants to take notes for that particular day or time. This is just a blank scatter plot for you to use in case you ever need to use scatter plots. You might actually need it to complete the assignment, the final assignment for this class. This is just an example of an ABC observation form. So you're basically talking about the behavior, you're making notes about what happens just prior to the behavior and then what happens right after. And this would help you figure out if there are any triggers, or is there a behavior that is maintaining, is there a consequence that is maintaining the behavior. Once again, this is just a blank ABC observation form for you to use if required. This is an example of a completed ABC sequence analysis. So let's see. Bell rings at 9:05. Teacher says, take your homework so we can correct it. Jason rummages his backpack. Consequence, teacher ignores his behavior. And teacher begins oral review and correction of homework with the class. Teacher says, Jason, what do you have for 3? Jason says, I guess I don't remember. The class giggles. If we would have just stopped there, we could have said that maybe Jason is looking for attention. But remember, we have to collect data over time. So then we continue collecting data. Teacher says, where is your homework? Jason says, I can't find it. Teacher frowns and walks up to Jason's desk. Now, at this point in time, if we stop, we would think maybe it's attention, because maybe Jason likes that the teacher walks up to him to talk to him. Teacher says, Jason, no homework, no privileges. Student says, Teacher says, Jason, you need to leave and go back to Mrs. Smith's resource room. So once again, we change our mind and we say, actually, it could be escape because Jason did not have his homework. And finally, that he knew that the teacher would probably send him off to Mrs. Smith's room. Now, what we really need to figure out is, we can't really stop here. We need to figure out what is happening in Mrs. Smith's room. Is that something that's reinforcing Jason's behavior? Is it because he just wants to escape the task, or is it because he wants to get attention there? Maybe he is required to complete the homework in Mrs. Smith's class. So we don't know, but this is just an example of how you can collect ABC data and how you can actually use it to figure out what the function of the behavior is. But as you can see, this can be a time consuming activity. So therefore, you really need to spend time and have the patience before you actually come to conclusions and or form the hypothesis. Whenever you collect data, it is important that you triangulate the data. You might be collecting data on scatter plots, ABC charts, and say, for example, you could be doing interviews. But ultimately, the goal is that all the 3 individual pieces should give you some common information. If that common pattern or trend is not there, you would probably have to rethink your observation techniques. So this is just another example of how you could collect data and then triangulate it. So basically, you take the data from your scatter plot and you summarize it. You take your data from the ABC chart, you summarize it, and then you take the data from the various interviews that you have collected and summarize it, and then try and figure out if you can see any common trends or patterns. Just an example of a blank data triangle chart in case you want to use it. Now let's spend some time talking about ways in which you can categorize behavior. So it could be function. Why the student is demonstrating the behavior? Is it because they want to escape the task? Is it because they want attention? Is it because they want to obtain something tangible? Or it could be sensory in terms of stimulation. You also have to figure out whether it's a skill deficit, whether it's a behavioral or an academic skill that the student does not know how to perform. And therefore, every time you present the student with, say, a maths worksheet, the student tears the worksheet and leaves the room. Or it could be a performance deficit, which is a behavioral or an academic skill that the student does not know but does not consistently perform. So maybe the child is just not motivated enough. They have the skills to perform the task, but they're just not doing it, maybe because it's not challenging enough for them. This is just a chart that talks about the payoffs for misbehavior. So what does the student get? Maybe attention from adults or peers, or it could be access to tangibles, or it could be stimulation. And what could the student avoid? It could be punishment or failure, it could be attention from others, or it could be the whole stimulation piece that we talked about. So when we have students who bang their heads with the head banging behavior, it could be because of a sense of simulation that they get when they actually bang their heads, say for example, against the wall. So let's talk about how to write a good hypothesis statement. And this is an example that you could use. It basically divides it into sections. So when X behavior occurs, it is usually in the context of X that you will put in where and when, and preceded by X triggers. The student's response is X. So once you complete it, it would form a complete statement. So this is just for you to read. And on the next slide, when taunting occurs, it is usually in transition times and is preceded by an upcoming period of social time, recess, lunch. Sarah's response is to criticize or make hurtful comments about other girls. The result of the behavior is usually hurt feelings and Sarah's separation from the other girls, which serves to remove Sarah from the social group. The function and or purpose of the behavior is likely to be that Sarah is purposely attempting to avoid having to interact with and be accepted by peers. The behavior seems to be a performance deficit because Sarah doesn't only display this behavior when she feels pressured to be accepted by other girls. So once again, a hypothesis statement, it basically summarizes the data that you have collected, and it tells us exactly why the behavior is occurring. And in this case, it seemed like it was serving the function of an escape behavior. So basically, we can say that functional behavioral assessment, along with problem solving, would help us either increase appropriate behavior and decrease inappropriate behaviors. So many times the function of the behavior is related to academic difficulties. So you really have to not just, if it's a behavior issue, does that really mean you can just focus on the behavior problems? No, we have to look at the whole picture to see what is going on and how we can help the student. If for example, it is the difficulty that the student is facing is because of academics, that the student is having behavior issues, then you have to make sure that you address both of them together. You cannot say, oh, let me first figure out how I can decrease the inappropriate behaviors that are happening and then come back to academics. You will have to work on both of them together. So it is once again very important in terms of how you record behaviors. So you have to make sure you're able to identify the behavior. You should be able to structure observations with comparison peer groups. So you shouldn't only look at the student, the target student, but also look at the other peers in the classroom. In a structured observation, you should also include the ratio of interactions, and the ideal number is actually 8 positives to 1 negative. So every time a teacher says one negative term to the student, they should make sure that they have 8 positives to say to the student as well.